All right, I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for checking out another one of our Ag Exchange conversations. Super excited to be able to have this conversation as we are celebrating Safe Family Farming's 10-year anniversary. And I have been a part of this for almost 2 years now, but it's really hard to imagine that this has already been a decade-long organization, and a lot of the work that has been going into Safe Family Farming, the individuals that have been a part of this work and organization have been at work really for the past, really beyond the past decade. And I'm super excited to chat with Gerald Barron, who was the founder and really helped kind of catalyze and show the need for an organization like Safe Family Farming in Washington State. Initially, we had hoped to get Larry Stap, who is a farmer in the Whatcom area, a dairy farmer, as well as someone who has been working with Safe Family Farming for really since really before the beginning of the organization. But as with farming, farmers are really working and operating on the brink, and Larry had to reach out to me this morning and share that he was not able to be a part due to some just logistical breakdowns that he was having to deal with on his farm, and with the flooding that has been going on in the Skagit and Whatcom area that has deeply impacted that region. He had some important issues that he needed to take care of just to keep his farm going. And so completely understand, but I'm very excited to have Gerald, who, like I mentioned, is the founder and first executive director for the organization. And then taking Larry's place in the conversation will be Dylan Honkoop, who is our current director of communications, but has been with Safe Family Farming for about 8 or 9 years or so. So real close to the beginning, and has seen a lot of the work and the history that has been going on this first decade with the organization. So I'm really excited to have both of these guys join and be a part of this conversation. But before we dive into that, I do want to share, we are live streaming right now. And so if you have any questions, or if we're going to be asking and having this conversation with Gerald and Dylan. But if you have any questions for the presenters, the people that we're going to be sharing, you can see that. Type them into the comments on whatever platform you're watching this, be it YouTube or Instagram or Facebook. We'll be trying to monitor those. So feel free to ask questions, and we'll have some time near the end. If individuals do have questions or want to make some comments, feel free. We'll be sharing those later on. But in the meantime, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for this webinar and for the Ag Exchange that we put on. This is the Kennewick Irrigation District has graciously supported and sponsored us. They are making these kind of conversations available and making these possible. And so we really want to give a big shout out to the Kennewick Irrigation District. We really appreciate their partnership and their support. We really couldn't be able to do this without them, and we are grateful to them for that. All right, well, enough of this. I'm going to take a moment, and we're going to bring onto the screen Dylan and Gerald. There we go. Guys, thank you both for taking some time. Dylan, I get to see you just about, and talk with you just about every day as we get to work together. Gerald, I am so thrilled to be able to have this conversation, bringing you back to this to help kind of talk to us about this organization that really was kind of a bit of your brainchild, that you saw a need for an organization like Safe Family Farming in Washington State. And I really appreciate you. I really appreciate both of you guys jumping on this conversation, being a part of this. I've got some questions that I want to field, but really the goal is I kind of want to just prime the pump and let you guys have at it and hear some of the stories. Before we got started kind of offline, I was chatting with you both saying, from my perspective, I've been at this for about 2 years now. There are plenty of stories, anecdotes, histories that I'm not aware of. And so from a personal, selfish perspective, I'm actually really excited to hear from you both. And thank you guys for doing this.
Well, thank you for inviting me to do this. This has been great fun. You sent a bunch of questions, which are really good, and got me reminiscing and sort of experiencing again the gratitude that I feel for the 10 years, that Safe Family Farming exists, and the years that I spent with it. So I appreciate this opportunity.
Good. Well,
and I don't expect I'll be able to do justice at all to filling in for Larry Stap and all the things that he could share behind the scenes that got this organization started. But I was around at the same time as this organization started, but in a different position as a reporter, reporting on farming issues. So I can talk a little bit about what was going on at that time from that perspective as well.
I love it. No, that'll be good. Well, then let me kind of give if I could, let me start the conversation, Gerald, with you. Can you give me a little bit of backstory on really even before Safe Family Farming started, kind of what was a little bit of your background and what was it that was the catalyst, I guess, in your mind to see a need for something like Safe Family Farming to even be in existence here in Washington State?
Well, I had sort of recently retired from my career mostly in crisis communication, reputation management, that sort of thing, and offered to do a retreat or a one-day media training retreat for farmers in the Whatcom County area, because I had worked with some of them on preparing for crises and things like that. And in doing that, we had about 30 people show up for that. But Fred Lickel came out, who's now the executive director of Whatcom Family Farmers, and he said, you know we're in a crisis, don't you? And I said, no. And he told me about a Como TV investigative report that did not go well for farmers. And I said, okay, yeah, you are it. And it was really triggered by lawyers that were seeking to sue a number of dairy farmers in the area, really on a false basis. So that was really the catalyst. So the dairy farmers sort of got together and hired me to help them with that particular situation. Then about the same time, the berry farmers in that area also talked to me about representing them from a public relations standpoint on issues that they were dealing with. And I said, why are we shouldn't be having separate efforts going on. We're all in this together. So that was the foundation of Whatcom Family Farmers. I was initially the executive director, but knew that I really couldn't do that in the way that it needed to be done. So Fred became executive director. So we operated there for about a year, maybe a little less than that. And then an issue came up called What's Upstream. And I would say What's Upstream was the catalyst for the creation of Safe Family Farming, because this was a vicious and very dishonest attack on dairy farming, really, with a whole number of environmental groups and some tribes that were trying to get legislation passed about buffers, which they're still trying to do, 12 years later. But it was a very dishonest public attack. They had billboards, they had advertising, they had social media, they put a lot of money together, and they used EPA funding to do this. So this was not a Whatcom County alone issue. It certainly was affecting Whatcom County, but it was a statewide issue. And so simultaneously, we were involved in some things communication-wise in Whatcom County that were making some of the leaders in Whatcom Family Farmers a little bit concerned, and they were wanting to kind of pull away from the communications a little bit, which I didn't like and didn't agree with. So I was also looking for a little more autonomy. And so really those two things came together, but it was primarily driven by a really major attack on farming that was, really quite awful and very dishonest. So that's why we got started. I started talking around to some other farmers that I knew in the area from Skagit County, and primarily from Skagit County, and some other farmers. I approached Larry Stap about whether or not he was interested in getting involved and being president, which he was. And we really attracted a really good group of farmers to be the initial board members. And many of those are still board members, 10 years later. So that's really a credit to them and to, I think, to the mission that we had.
Okay, so kind of, if I could kind of build on that though. So at what point did you feel, so there was a initial crisis that that the state was addressing, or that you were addressing here in the state, I should say, with this What's Upstream campaign. At what point did it feel like, okay, we have one crisis, but really there's a place for safe family farming moving forward? This isn't just a kind of one and done issue. We really see this as an ongoing effort and a need for an organization like Safe Family Farming to exist, to defend and advocate for agriculture. Was there a moment that you really kind of saw that?
That was really quite far down the line before I started seeing this as an ongoing thing. And probably just because of my background as a consultant, which is what I did most through my career, I tended to see things from a project basis and from an issue basis. So that's how I was really approaching it. And actually, it was one of the reasons why I ended up leaving as executive director, because it had gotten to the point where it needed to be more sustained over a long period of time with, ongoing sustaining fundraising. And that wasn't really my approach. It was much more issue based. And really, when What's Upstream started and we got that, of course, that was it was a long pull. It didn't go away right away. We were in it probably for a couple of years. I mean, Dylan, when you joined in late, I think we were probably still dealing with and some of the fallout of that. But really, I was very issue based and very project based. And so the funding efforts that we made at that time were really, hey, we have this big problem. Here's what our plan is. And my view of leadership has always been, this is where we're going. Who wants to come along? And that's not necessarily ideal from a sustaining standpoint. So to answer your question, no, I think for the first several years anyway, it was more, okay, we got this battle to fight, let's get in it. And then by about the time that one died down, boom, there's another one that popped up, and pretty soon we're dealing with 4, 5, 6 at the same time. And then I started realizing that, yeah, this is more than just an issue-based effort.
Yeah. No. Okay. Well, Dylan, let me pull you into this a minute. So you came on board about a year and a half, maybe 2 years after the organization really started. Were you becoming aware of Safe Family Farming even before they approached you to jump on board? What was the perspective that you had to this organization even before you came on staff?
Well, absolutely. And I was an advocate for a group like Safe Family Farming. And again, it's local precursor Whatcom Family Farmers being formed. And in fact, before Gerald even got involved, way back, in 2006, I started as a reporter at KGMI Radio in Bellingham. And so I'd been doing that for several years. Folks in the farming community where I come from here in Linden knew about that, and then they brought me into a meeting. It was, again, several years after I had been in the broadcast media business, and they said, hey, we've got some issues. At that point, they were trying to form the watershed improvement districts to be able to have a seat at the table legally on some important water issues, which again we continue to grapple with to this day. And they were asking how they should go about this, and particularly what the public communications element should be of this, and should that be a part of this? And I said, absolutely. And they were asking me, could you help with this? I said, I'm very busy with what I'm doing. Also don't know if it would be a conflict of interest as a reporter reporting on these issues. And they said, well, we had also heard recently from Gerald Barron. Do you think we should talk with him more about it? And I said, absolutely. Talk with Gerald. You need his involvement in this. And then I was able to watch it mostly from the outside at that point. At that time, radio station leadership had also said, hey, we need more coverage of farming on our radio station. Let's start the farming show, which I continue to host to this day. But initially I was doing that as a radio station project, and often was having Gerald and Fred and Larry, Ed Block. I remember I even got Ed Block on the radio back in the day, in the early stages of Whatcom Family Farmers, and then certainly cheered the formation of Safe Family Farming. To zoom forward to that What's Upstream situation, though, that Gerald mentioned, that really was the springboard for Safe Family Farming specifically. I remember that weekend before that story really broke, getting text messages, which were not the thing that they are today back then, but a grainy photo, as best as people could take on their cell phones back then, of bus boards on local public transportation buses here with these phony pictures of cows walking through streams. I knew something was wrong. I had no idea the scope of it, but at that point I was hosting the daily morning political talk show on KGMI radio. So that Monday morning we went live on the air with that. And I was proud to say that, we talked about it from 8 to 9 that morning. And by 11:30 that morning, the transit authority was calling us saying that they had pulled all of those bus boards off their buses because they recognized that there was a major problem with this campaign that it had bought advertising with them.
Well, that is a good segue actually to kind of initially, in those first couple of years, what were some of the challenges? I mean, you're starting an organization from really literally scratch from nothing, and saying, hey, okay, let's gather the people we need, let's gather the resources, let's gather the funding, let's get that momentum. But really, you're working, trying to push a thing uphill. What were some of those initial challenges, and what was some of maybe the victories that y'all saw, that kind of kept steam in that engine to say, hey, I think we can keep going. I think we can keep going.
Well, that's a great question, because the challenges are really very closely related to what we saw initially as our vision. And the vision was, put very simply, unifying farmers to have a strong voice in the public arena. And the two problems that we had with that, and to some degree you still have that, Ben, is unifying farmers and having a strong public voice. So I remember very early on, a leader of one of the other farm organizations in the area said, well, there's some people really objecting to what you're trying to do because they think such and such. And I said, the question that everyone has to face is, if whatever reason they have for objecting to what we're doing, or what issues are being addressed, or what are those objections more important than farmers getting together, speaking with a single voice? And that was, I guess, a kind of a mantra that we had, is that the unification was extremely important. But speaking with a strong public voice was something very, very new to farmers, and still is to some farmers. And if there's one thing I'm proud of over the 10 years, it's that we've made a lot of progress, in my mind, in having farmers and the farming community overall understand how important it is for the future of farming in our area, for farmers to speak out, to have a strong public voice. And it was, farmers want to farm. That's what they're good at. That's what they want to do. And so the whole area of public communication, of public relations, of media relations, it was not only new to them, it was something uncomfortable to them. So those are the primary obstacles to some degree. You haven't changed that. You still have to deal with that, Ben. But there's been a lot of progress, and that's something I'm really grateful for and proud of that we were able to do.
I know from my perspective, what we were asking the farming community to do at that time was really counterintuitive for them. We're talking about them becoming more and more aware that they were in a public and a media landscape that was attacking them. And we were asking them to make themselves, as they felt, more exposed rather than less. I mean, people's intuition is to run away, stay away from those attacks, put up your defenses, don't say anything, avoid that. That's just human nature. Anyone feels like that. Why would I want to engage when this is going to be painful or risky for me? But at the same time, from the news side of the ledger, where I was coming from initially, before I even joined the organization, I knew this was a problem, because I could see it from the newsroom perspective, where issues would be brought up, accusations would be made, and there would be no response from the farming community. At the same time, I was connected to the farming community. I grew up in the farming community. These are people I knew and loved and supported. And in some cases, I would even know that there was an entirely different side to the story. The truth was far different than what was being reported publicly. But I couldn't get a farmer to talk about it or to call that out. And I would be very frustrated as a reporter trying to get the farmer to convince them it's okay, for you to share the truth about this. I don't blame them. And particularly in hindsight, as I've learned so much more since then, I don't blame them for not wanting to do that. Like Gerald said, it's uncomfortable. But it was exactly what needed to be done, because the truth is you're safer when you have a public voice, that you appeal to what the public cares about, and the public supports that and cares about you because you're fighting for the same thing they're fighting for. And it's really those accusing the farmers who are against that public good, that moral high ground. And once people can see that, they can speak out with that understanding, they put themselves actually in a stronger position, again, counterintuitive to the sense that I'm going to only weaken my position. I'm going to put myself at risk if I say anything at all. And therefore, I'm going to choose to say nothing because this is difficult. This is awkward. I don't know how my words are going to be twisted. So I am going to step back from the cameras and the microphones rather than lean in and speak the truth.
Let me add one thing to that, Ben, if I may. Some of our biggest problems, and we still are haunted by some of the organization is still haunted by some of that. The biggest people who objected to it were some of the leaders of other farm organizations. Part of that was, not really understanding the role of public communication and the need for it. But a lot of it was really based upon fear of competition. They saw us, doing some fundraising, and there was concern that they were going to be, we were going after the same pool that they were dependent on. And so, in one case in particular, in Skagit County, we were very deeply hurt, and I think the problems, the lack of success that we've had in Skagit County in terms of unifying the farmers and getting more, really on board is because of a lot of distortions, misinformation, personal attacks that one particular leader of an organization, raised against us. And so that was hard because I know Fred and I had talked to him many times. We have our external obstacles, like the community to community or the environmental groups that that were fighting us in some cases, lawyers that were wanting to sue us. But we also had internal obstacles, so it was a matter of kind of having to deal with both internal and external. That I don't want to make it sound like it was a huge problem or that that it because really it went amazingly well, but it wasn't always easy.
Yeah. No, you it sounds like you really had to kind of earn your place a little bit, show that kind of prove yourself a bit. And that really was, those first several years seemed like that really was the case.
And I think that was, again, I mentioned sort of our leadership approach, which was this is where we're going. Come along with us if you will. Support us if you can. But it wasn't a matter of, and it wasn't a style, I guess, that fit with everybody, because a lot of people say, hey, let's get everybody together and let's see if we can get some consensus on what we want to do, and we'll make sure that everyone's on board before we move forward. If we had done that, we never would have, really gotten going. So it was a matter of saying, this is what we need to do. And some people are going to see that we need to do that and get behind us. And other people are going to sit in the sidelines. And then a few of them said, no, we're going to try and stop you. So that was kind of the story for the first few years. Now, I think it's changed a lot, but that was kind of what we dealt with.
Yeah. Okay. Now with that, so there's plenty of challenges, like you said, both external and internally even, but was there a point or maybe an anecdote that you could point to where you really saw we moved the needle here, where you can say, hey, we are making a difference, and What was that moment?
Yeah,
Really, for both of y'all, what was that moment like?
caused me to, to think about that. And I'm looking on my wall over here. You can't see it well. Maybe I can turn my. I have a couple of awards on the wall that I'm rather proud of. And we about a year into the What's Upstream campaign, the Washington State Farm Bureau and the Washington State Dairy Federation both presented us with the President's Awards, and those were remarkable from the standpoint of getting the recognition from those organizations, because even within the Farm Bureau, there weren't necessarily people who were that supportive of what we were trying to do. So, and one of the reasons that the president of the Farm Bureau at that time said is that you were able to move fast where we simply didn't have the capability of doing that. And that made me realize that not only the approach that we were taking, but the organization, the board that we had, the methods that we had for making certain that we had approvals to move forward with things, but they didn't slow us down. We were able to be very nimble. So that was one big thing. When we got the funding, as we did from the dairy community through through the DFAC, that was a real boost to us in terms of saying, hey, yeah, we really do have the support of that community. But in the EPA struggle, which was probably, and Dylan will remember this vividly, because Dylan was very involved in that long EPA struggle about the nitrate report and the lawsuits and so that were coming out of that. But when we were able to have, we got 12 national farm organizations to support us, and we had the attention of the national headquarters of EPA because of the absolutely outrageous behavior of EPA Region 10, which you guys have just been involved in, really highlighting that. But to realize that we were able to really muster a national level support and really make some people very nervous that should have been very nervous. So that was those are some highlights.
Yeah. Dylan, how about you? I'm curious, your take. What were some of those early, I guess, victories, as well as maybe some of the kind of pull back the curtain a little bit? What were some of the behind the scenes operations to get some of those victories in place from your perspective?
Oh, goodness. I mean, there are a lot of things that we could point to. And maybe it's just because I've been so busy at it, but I think of some more recent things. That a couple of years ago, we were able to gather more than 300 farm workers on the steps of the Washington State Capitol. That was huge. That we were able to get over 1 million views for a documentary film talking about losing the farm. Some of those kinds of things have been very, very important to me as benchmarks or road signs that, hey, we are on the right road and we are making progress, as much as the day-to-day can seem like such a slog, honestly. Continued false information, always having to push back at it. You think you've cleared things up, and there are actors out there that will continue to bring false information up again and again from any angle you can possibly think of. And so, that in the midst of that slog, it can be hard to remember or keep your eye on the ball, that we are making progress in helping people know the truth about farming, to connect with farmers, and to have a voice for the farming community, as we were trying to, back to what I was saying earlier about encouraging people to do something that was very counterintuitive to them. It's always been reminding farmers that your story will be told. The question is, who's going to tell it, and what's it going to sound like? Are you going to tell it and share the truth, or will someone else, potentially your opponent, either in the courtroom or in Olympia or in the public sphere, will they tell the story and not tell the truth? So those are important things that underpin everything we do to this day. Looking back, yeah, it's been exciting to see a lot of the success we've had, but with the potential I think that we see in the future, it's hard. even to spend a lot of time looking back, because there's a lot of, I think, exciting things still to come.
Hey, you related to this question, Ben, one of the questions you asked, and maybe you're going to get there, but you said, what are some of the things looking back that make you smile? And again, that made me think of a few things. One of them that was really very satisfying was to have the president of Evergreen State College call us up on the phone and apologize to us. And then to have national news cover that story that was on Fox News nationally, which was pretty interesting, because what happened, just very briefly, is that community with Rosalinda Guillen, they had recruited students to protest against the farms. This was the Sarbanan, but also they were involved with Sakuma Farms and other things like that, and protesting. Well, the faculty, both at Western, but at Evergreen State College, were not only handing out class credit, they were using school vans to bus students to these protests, which of course the news media was treating as if they were worker protests, but they were bussed-in students. And they were using state equipment, state-owned equipment in this attack on farmers, which we knew was illegal. So we raised that issue, and they did an investigation. The professors involved were punished, but the director of public relations for the university was so upset about them not being punished more severely, which they really should have been, that she resigned. But the president of the college did call us and apologize for that. So that was one thing that was really sort of gratifying. Another thing, which very few people would have known about, but that makes me smile to this day, is that we had a lawyer from Eugene, Oregon, and another one from Seattle who were involved in the effort to, both what's upstream, but also to sue the dairy farmers, which they did in Eastern Washington based upon the EPA report. But we were challenging them very vigorously on our website, pointing out things that they were saying which were absolutely not true. They were just making up stuff and lying. And so we put those challenges out on our website saying what they were saying wasn't true. Well, I got a letter personally, and I think the organization did as well, saying that if we didn't retract these statements and sign this letter of apology, which they had conveniently drafted for us, that they were going to sue us for libel. And of course, that made some of our board and so quite nervous. And I just kind of laughed at it, because I said, yeah, this is what lawyers do. They try to intimidate you, and some, I shouldn't say all lawyers, but some of them do. And so they were really trying to get us to shut up and stop our expose of their false information. So what we did, and we had some advice from a lawyer on this as well, is to say, here's what we've said. If you can prove that we're wrong, if you can show that what we've said isn't true, we will sign your letter, we will retract it, and we will apologize. We never heard another word, of course, because what they were saying wasn't true. So that makes me laugh a few years later.
So one of the, if you've been around the organization for any length of time, you know that truth is a huge foundational component that from the very beginning, and I've heard it from you, Gerald, and you, Dylan, numerous times in just our, the first 30 minutes we've been chatting. This clinch grip to truth is really what Safe Family Farming is basing its content on. We don't want to say anything. We don't want to put out content. We don't want to publish an article or a press statement that is not founded in truth. And if we're making a claim, even if it's an op-ed, opinion piece, if we're making a claim or a statement, we want it to be grounded in fact and in truth. And that really is something we've seen. Gerald, I'm hearing from you that this has been from the very beginning, that we want to be able to stand by our claims and not prop up, just some sort of feelings-based, emotional-based claim. But we want it to be based on some sort of foundation of truth.
You're absolutely right, because really, from our standpoint, from any public communication standpoint, it comes down to credibility.
Right.
Can you be believed? And that was a problem that we had with so many of these people that were attacking farmers, whether in Eastern Washington, the things that they were saying about dairy farmers and nitrates and things like that, or what Rosalinda Guillen and her people at Community were saying. So much of it wasn't true. It was obvious. I mean, like Rosalinda saying that there were lots of farm workers available for the farmers to hire, that they didn't need to hire guest workers. Well, some of those things are very, very easy to show that they weren't true. At the same time, we were by countering some of that, we knew we were exposing ourselves, because if they could find anything that we were saying wasn't true, they would undermine our credibility, even as we were undermining theirs. So from a strategic standpoint, as well as a personal and moral standpoint, speaking the truth is everything.
Absolutely.
You absolutely have to do it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Well, okay, this kind of moves right into another question I really wanted. What were some of the early lessons? And not even necessarily, I'm not even necessarily thinking negatively. It's just, what were some of the maybe positive or negative lessons that you learned through this first decade as you both were, working through this organization, building something from the ground up? What were some of the lessons that y'all learned?
Well, I can point to one instance that caused us a lot of problems, more problems than it should have caused, because it was used against us by some that didn't want to see us succeed. But we had a situation in Washington State Legislature where there was I can't remember what the specific bills were, what the issues were, but we had heard I had heard directly from a person who had talked to the Republicans, the leading Republican in the House, that a particular representative was sponsoring a bill that was very harmful. And so based upon that information, we launched a campaign encouraging our farmers and supporters to make contact, send a message to this particular representative's office. Well, it turned out the information we had was false. And so, and of course, the person who was getting all of this was unhappy with us, because we had flooded his office with, expressions of concern about something that he wasn't really involved in doing. And so as soon as we found that out, we apologized and said, yeah, that was our mistake. We had gotten it, from my standpoint, on good information, but the information wasn't good enough. And so we made a big mistake. And again, the real problem, it was a mistake on one hand. At the same time, I know that particular representative became aware of what we were able to do in terms of bringing some pressure to bear, even though it was wrong. It was wrong-headed. We were successful to that degree, and because he was not a friend of farmers in any way. And so I think it had a positive effect overall. And the fact that we very quickly apologized and went public and said we messed up and really did that. But again, it was used by those within the farm community who did not want to see us succeed as something that was very harmful to our interests overall. So it was a big mistake.
Sure. But it was a lesson learned. When you do make a mistake, you owned it. As opposed to just digging in your heels and, countering yourself. You own it.
Yeah, we better do it fast.
Say, hey,
but also the lesson was, make sure when you launch an attack, you got the facts right. Yeah, and that was the basic mistake that we made.
Yeah, no. One of the comments we just got was, from Sherry. She says it's called transparency, integrity. You bring your receipts, you show your work, and you expect others to bring theirs and show their own work. And we're seeing that with Safe Family Farming. That is a huge thing for us. We want to be a group that we rely on truth, we rely on facts. When we make a misstep, let's own it and set right and call it out. And just like we're going to hold others accountable for their actions, we also want to be held accountable for ours. And we want to make sure that the people that are talking to us and working with us, they can rely on us.
It's about building trust. And we have to remember that we're representing the farmers. And so anything that we do to undermine the trust, not in Safe Family Farming, reflects back on the farmers that we're representing. So to me, it's a sacred trust. It's something that we have to keep in mind.
Absolutely. No, I do want to just encourage those, if you are watching, whatever platform you're looking at this on, be it Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, feel free to, if you have any questions for Gerald or Dylan, just want to ask anything about the first decade, feel free to put that in the comments. We're keeping track of that and watching that. So I want to encourage that one more. Dylan, how about yourself? From your perspective over the 8 years or so that you've been with the organization, what are some of the lessons that you've learned, or some of the things that you've learned from this process?
Well, I'd say the biggest lessons I've learned are things I learned from Gerald, and how he understands and came to this organization with an understanding of how the overall process of public communication, particularly around hot button issues, actually works. And I remember learning from him early on and thinking, not with a large amount of skepticism, but okay, that maybe applies to this situation and that situation. And over the years, to watch it play out again and again, how issues come from nothing essentially to being leveraged by an activist group or a lawyer or someone just in the news media with an axe to grind, how it becomes a big controversy, an accusation against farmers, how that becomes this big, how they create the appearance of public outrage about some alleged problem that may not even be true in the first place. And then how that ultimately inspires Olympia to action, and how you can use that to really trace where a lot of the frustrating decisions that we see our government making toward farming, and really a lot of other things, where those things really come from, how that gets started. It doesn't just boom someday, suddenly, someone writes a bunch of rules that amount to red tape for the farming community. There is a process, and most people aren't aware of it, and most people end up being used as pawns in the midst of that, not understanding what's really true and not understanding how they're being used by the powers that be, and the people that are playing games essentially with people's hearts and minds to serve their narrowly focused and oftentimes harmful agendas. I mean, it sounds extreme, but it's almost eerie sometimes how you can mark this out almost every single time. You dig to the root of something that's going on, something that's false, something that's accusing farmers, and you find these things at the root: lies, ulterior motives, political motivations, and a whole machine that leverages public communication to smear farmers and to try to make things happen, give people their political or legal wins. And maybe that's another thing too. A lot of us have at least some faith in the judicial system, and Gerald has been very skeptical of that and shared that with me, and so far he's been proven to be right. He taught me the term the litigation industry. I think that was from one of our friends here in the organization. I don't know if that was a board member initially or someone in an organization that we connected with, but it's very appropriate to understand how our legal system has come to be. And I hate to be a cynic, but public opinion, even though it is not supposed to have a bearing on the interpretation of the law, has a huge impact. So being involved in this organization, it's taught me a lot about specifically what we do. And again, I've gained so much of a foundation in that from Gerald, but it's also changed the way, I was already politically a skeptic on a lot of things, but it's really given form to what's going on in our world and what the truth is about how our society functions and how much dysfunction we have. It's only become that much more stark in the years since I joined this organization. And it's, in some ways, it's disheartening when you see really the depth of it, but at the same time, it feels good to come from a place of really understanding a bit more of the big picture of what we're up against, and being able to then communicate that to the farming community so they can take part in that and understand, at least as frustrating the situations can be, where these attacks come from and what's really going on, which informs us as to how we can respond to this and correct the record anywhere we possibly can.
Yeah. Okay, now I want to, looking as we look at the current structure as well, and where we're at now, and looking ahead, what would you say is the value from your perspective of, say, family farming? I just this past week heard of one farmer who was expressing, say family farming is one of the most valuable tools we got in our toolbox. That this has worth. You get the biggest bang for your buck with this organization that we've been a part of. You two in particular really helped build it up, that make it what it is and make it that valuable tool. If you were to explain that to someone maybe who isn't even in the farming community, a non-farmer who doesn't know a whole lot about, say, family farming, what would you explain is the value of an organization like, say, family farming?
Well, I'll take a run at it, but I'll just leverage off from what Dylan was just saying, because as I look back over the 10 years, I think that probably the greatest value that we've done is not necessarily succeeding at the issue management side of it, but more educating the farm community and farm leaders in seeing the importance of the role of a strong voice, a strong unified voice. And that job is not done, as Ben, I'm sure you have found out. There's still a long ways to go, but the more we do that, more, say, family farming does that in the coming years, I think the stronger the farm community will be in dealing with the challenges, which always seem to be ever getting greater and greater, but the challenges that they have ahead of them. And one thing I would say, we didn't set out. I certainly didn't think that our primary role was education, like I'm sort of suggesting it is now. But I think that we educated by doing, not by saying, hey, everybody, this is what you have to learn, or this is how you have to think about things, but by saying, this is how we're going to approach this particular issue and this challenge, whether it's what's upstream or the EPA nitrate report, or the organized labor attacks on farmers and treatment of farm workers, things like that. This is how we're going to deal with it. And in the process of doing that, and then watching it, just like Dylan was saying, as he participated in and provided a lot of leadership for the approaches that we took, I think that people were saying, hey, this might really work. this might be doing something positive for us. So I think continuing to do, but recognizing that doing that and doing it successfully has a tremendous education component, I think is the key to the future. You agree, Dylan?
I agree. And I think a huge value is the farming community now is coming to a place where it does have a voice. We see the potential, which can be seen as a positive. It can also be seen as a negative, because there's a lot more that we need to do. And so many times where the farming community isn't consulted on a variety of fronts, particularly within public communication and the news media. But we are making strides there, that we are a go-to source of information for people in the news media to actually get a response. When in the past, so many times things would be reported, outrage would be generated in public, and it was no comment from the farmers. Farmers declined to comment. And those of us who are in public communications professionally know how harmful that can be in perception of a community. Even when the truth may absolutely be on your side, in reality you're the good guy in the story. But when it's reported that you had no comment, the public becomes suspicious of you. And I think the value is we've brought ourselves at least to a place, again, a long ways yet to go, but to where the farming community has a voice, has a face, and we have a growing infrastructure to be able to get the voice of the farming community in front of the TV cameras, in front of the radio microphones, on social media. And now that we have at least that start, that toehold, that's where we have a lot of work yet to do to continue to unify more and more people, bring more and more voices into that, and connect with more and more other communities that aren't even aware. And honestly, there are a lot of folks who are likely to be supportive of the farming community if they can hear from the farmer. And that has been such a priority of ours, not to just have me as the communications director guy speak. I'm just, you could say I'm just a hack, whatever. It's important to get the farmer out there in public, because that's who's growing the food that the public consumes, that they care about, that's stewarding the land, that's taking care of workers, so many things that they do. And for the people to, the public in our urban areas are increasingly urbanized society, for them to be able to see those folks directly is huge.
Let me tell you,
That's what we provide day in and day out.
let me tell you a funny story to support what Dylan was saying about getting the farmers to talk. On a completely different context, I had lunch recently with the investigative reporter from Como TV, who did that horrible TV report that basically set off the crisis that started all of this. And like I said, it was completely different context, but I was shocked to meet up with him, and I started talking to him about what happened. And I said, what you reported was completely false. What he was taking everything that the lawyers who are suing the farmers or wanting to sue the dairy farmers, and taking that and assuming, and his response was, yeah, but I couldn't get any farmers to talk to me and to say anything different. And he was right. It was unfair. We look at it and say he was doing a bad job, and yet the problem with it was largely there was nobody to counter it. And so that was really made it clear why we needed to be there. But and Ben, I don't know if you're going to ask this question, but it was a really good one to say, and you might not like my answer to this question, but you asked, what do I think would happen if safe family farming wasn't around anymore? I think it's a great question, and I think a lot of people would really work to make certain that never happens. But my answer to that question was not much. And the reason is because I think there's so many other farm leaders of other farm organizations, including some that opposed us early on, that are now stepping up to the plate much more and getting much more engaged in public communication and in countering false information. And also, I think a lot more farmers are aware of the need and more capable of standing up. If an investigative reporter does that, I think you guys get a whole lot of people you can call on and that would be willing and do a very effective job in presenting that. So yes, I hope safe family farming is here for a long time, but I think it's to its credit, it's changed the situation enough so that if it did go away, we'd still be in a better position than we were before.
Yeah, I actually love that perspective, because you do get to. It's not a Lone Ranger, one man show by any stretch. There's a lot of credit that gets to be spread around, but safe family farming gets to take some of that credit and say, hey, you've got a legacy here that you've worked hard, you've worked diligently this whole first decade. And now you've set the example that others are now able to follow. They've kind of seen the example that they get to then walk within your footsteps and say, okay, this can be done. We can, be more, take more of the offensive approach, not simply always reacting to bad policy or bad messaging that comes our way. We can be more activistic and take a stand and recognize, hey, you have empowered a lot of individuals, both within the farming community, leaders within the different commodity groups as well, to say we can take a stand, we can step up. And you get a lot of credit for that. And that is a powerful role that you've been able to take on. Now thinking just, we've got a handful of minutes left, but as we look at that role that you've set and that legacy that has been built on these last 10 years, this last decade, what are some of you've talked a little bit about some of the ways that maybe you have some hope moving forward. There's a lot of pressure. Some of the comments that we've got, we've got a legislative session coming up, that there are some bills and policies that are, dangling out there that could be very detrimental or harmful to agriculture. There are agencies, Safe Family Farming, really over the past decade, really from its existence, has been battling and pushing back against more activistic, extremist policies coming from the EPA in particular, and the Region 10 EPA, some of the personnel in there that we've seen some positive steps forward, but there's a lot of work still to do. Looking ahead, as those fights and battles and pressures are still continuing, what is it that kind of gives you hope, looking ahead into the coming years and that coming decade?
Well, I'll tell you what gives me hope above all is that people are still eating, and people still need to eat. And overall, as from what I've seen of the studies, the vast majority of the voting public of both parties have a high degree of respect for farmers, and they want to see farmers continue. Really, the job that we had to do was to try to leverage that support into the support that we needed when it came to making legislative decisions or judicial decisions, or the decisions that other people are making that really affect farmers. And I think rightfully we saw that to do that, we really needed to unify farmers and to get them to speak publicly with a strong voice. So I guess, and I knew that I wasn't the one to carry the vision forward, but I was always hoping that we would be able to get to a point, which we certainly didn't, under my leadership. And Ben, I'm hoping maybe under your leadership we'll get closer to that. But farmers alone can't save the future of farming. Farmers need farm friends. They need people within the broader community who will stand up for farming alongside of farmers. And I think, overall, we've made a lot of progress on that. I think some of the tools that you guys are using are very helpful in enlisting more support on specific issues. But, if I would sort of share a vision for safe family farming in the future, is that it would continue to be farmer-based and farmer-driven, farmer-led, but it would incorporate a much broader swath of the greater community and on all sides of the political spectrum, which is very diverse now, but they share something in that they eat and they want to see farmers continue to produce food. So we have a unifying opportunity, and I think a real need to get a broader community more involved in the issues that we face.
Dylan, yourself.
In terms of hope, I mean, something that gives me hope, in spite of, like I said earlier, it can be a slog day in and day out. And here's another angle on the same falsehood that we've been hearing over and over for years. And you just can't believe that some of these people, again, with an axe to grind or a political game to play, ulterior motives, you can't believe that they're bringing this forward again and again. I'm dealing with something like that today, exactly as we speak. But even as that continues, the thing that gives me hope is, in spite of all the falsehoods, the truth is still on our side. And that part makes our job easy. I don't have to put lipstick on a pig. I just have to get the truth out there, and that our farming community overwhelmingly is doing incredible things, not just growing food, but providing jobs for folks, creating a community, stewarding the environment, taking care of animals. They're doing so many great things. And again, the truth is on our side. This wouldn't be possible if that wasn't the case, as much as our detractors out there would try to say otherwise. Like Gerald had that experience years ago. Show us where we're wrong, we'll apologize. But in the meantime, these are the facts, and deal with it. And it really does give me hope and makes my job doable, that we have that high ground of truth to stand on.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I have one more question, and before I do, though, I want to thank you both very much for taking this time. Really, it's always a joy and a privilege to get to interact with both of you. The opportunities I've had to work with you both have been an honor and continue to be that. So just last question, though, looking back over this past decade, the past years, what has safe family farming meant to you personally? Maybe what has it given you
I so appreciate that question, Ben. But the answer is really simple. It's the remarkable men and women who I've had the privilege of meeting, getting to know, some of them becoming very good friends. I told one of the leading berry farmers when I started this, I said, farmers intimidate me. And they, and they did, because I have such respect for farmers and for the work that they do and for the very difficult challenges that they face. I'm just been so grateful for the support that I was given personally, and the organization was given. I mean, board members that stepped up, and some of them, many of them, have stayed with the organization for 10 years. I know there's rotating out now, but just the loyalty that they've had, and what I've learned from them. I appreciate so much when people tell me that they've learned from me, but I've learned so much from them. And it's the personal relationships, and being farther away out from it, it's what I miss. That I think that's the really important thing, and that's what I take from it. And I'm grateful, very grateful for the opportunity that I was given to be involved in this great community for those many years.
I love that. Dylan, how about you?
And
what does this mean?
For me, I mean, this is a big part of my life, not just because I've now spent, going on, it's still a year and a half or a couple of years away from being, a 10-year employee here at Save Family Farming, but beyond the time spent and the effort put into this was my life long before. The things that I'm passionate about, growing up on a farm, and having a passion for whatever reason, just the way I was wired and the way I was built for public communication from a young age. Save Family Farming was in the right place at the right time for my world, and brought the two parts of my world, farming and communications, together. And so this gives me an outlet for what I'm passionate about anyway. I don't know if I'll ever be able to retire from this, being that it's so connected just to my DNA as a person. So that's what it means to me. Is it's hard to, and I know that gets into the unhealthy work-life balance kind of territory there, but it's hard to separate myself from what this organization is all about, because I care that deeply about it. And so it just the fact that it is here and does exist, because like I said, even before the organization formed, I felt such a strong need for this, as a farm kid working in media. I don't know what I would do and what we as a community would do without it.
Yeah, I love that. That is a beautiful spot to land on. And I'm so glad that you both have received a great deal, but know that I am so grateful to you both for the work that you have both put in this past decade. And I know you don't get all the credit. There are numerous men and women that have been a part of this organization for the past decade, several who have been watching this video as well as it's been live, and probably will when we will show it later as well. To that
Ben,
group, we are so grateful.
Ben,
go ahead, Gerald. Yes.
I'm really remiss. I know I mentioned the board several times, but I just want to put a shout out to Larry Stap.
Yes.
I mean, Larry was our companion, our fellows in arms, from the very beginning. And the fact that he's a busy guy, he's got a lot on his plate, as we saw today. But the fact that he was so willing and eager, and the role that he played in providing the support and in leading other farmers, I can't say enough about it. And so Larry's one of those people I'm very grateful for the role that he played in my life as well.
Yes. Yeah. Well, with that, thank you guys. Thank you both for sharing some of those stories, the lessons, the ups and downs. And it really is something that one makes me really puts a lot of, in some ways, weight, but it puts a lot of just healthy weight on that. You're able to see, hey, this is important. This organization has value. This has.
Right. I just realized there's somebody else that really needs, and that's Fred Lickle. Fred not only was was really a founder of this organization from the very beginning. He's the one who said, we're in a crisis, don't you? But he, not only served as executive director of Whatcom Family Farmers, which he still did, but also as interim director for, I think, 2 years or something of Safe Family Farming. And not only just, filled in a gap, but he really moved the organization forward and did a super job. And I don't think Safe Family Farming would have been here to hire you, Ben, if it wasn't for Fred and him carrying on the great work. So I just realized that we're in remiss of not really bringing Fred into it and the great work that he did.
I agree. No, this is just an example of the numerous people that we really are kind of building on their example, their leadership, the framework that they laid. And so we're very grateful to them. And anything else before I let y'all go? Before I really do appreciate anybody else that we should thank as well. But I really appreciate.
There's too many.
There are too many. I agree. Well,
I just want to say thanks to Gerald for taking a chance and hiring me. He's the reason I'm around here.
Well, you've done great work, Dylan. So sometimes I'm smarter than I have any right to be.
Good. Guys, thank y'all both. Thank you both for your leadership, and thanks for taking some time with us. And for those that have been watching us, thank you so much. I will say, if you have any comments or questions that you want to reach out to Safe Family Farming, you can do so by connecting on our website at www.safefamilyfarming.org, or feel free to send us an email at info@safefamilyfarming.org. You can use this QR code here if you need to sign up for our newsletter. We send out a monthly newsletter, as well as periodic information that will go straight to your email inbox. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Certainly reach out if there's anything that we can do or kind of be in the know with you on. Let us know. Reach out. Don't hesitate. We are excited to be able to announce just this past week the production and premiere of our latest documentary film, Farming on the Brink. You can check out that film online right now. Watch it, share it, comment. We're looking to really increase the audience that are watching this film, and hopefully the reach that this will be having and the impact that it's going to be having over the months to come. So certainly check that out. But with that, gentlemen, as always, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And to our viewers, thank you for tuning in, and let us know if we can be of any support. And we look forward to the next decade.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ben.